Cory Desmond was born March 18, 1980, at Torrance Memorial Hospital. And right from the start, she was the center of attention because she had to fight to survive. Due to a hole in her diaphragm, she had to undergo multiple surgeries. She was only given a 20% chance of survival. And miraculously, she not only survived, but she thrived. Friends and family of Desmond knew her as a smart, self-confident young woman, unafraid to express her opinion, who was energetic and full of affection for those she cared about, who were many. Desmond graduated from North Torrance High School and earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State. Unsure of her calling in life, she changed her mind and decided to become a teacher. Her goal was to teach autistic children. A week after her death, a notice came in the mail that she had earned her teaching credential. She was loved by many and a friend to all. She was sweet at times but could be tough as nails. She could command a bar full of patrons when she wanted, and all the while be singing one of her favorite karaoke songs, such as Black Velvet or These Boots Were Made for Walking. And once again, being the center of attention, it was that secondary family that Cory acquired while working in those various establishments that kept her going back despite what her family wanted her to do. In 2009, Cory worked in a bar. On Saturday, February 14th, she had a shift that ended at 9:30 p.m. She then walked 2 blocks to the popular Bar Street Lounge. Many employees of this bar knew Cory as she had friends working there. She was caught on surveillance cameras helping her friends at the bar. She left there only after closing, around 2 a.m. None of her friends saw her after that. On Monday, February 16th, at approximately 2:20 p.m., the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office received a terrifying call. About 100 miles from the bar where people last saw Cory, a driver stopped to take snow chains off the wheels. The man felt a strong, unpleasant smell as soon as he exited the car. He thought the source of the stench was an animal that got hit by a car but still decided to check. Not far from the car, he found something strange. He saw a black plastic garbage bag with a woman's body inside. The man ran out into the road in a panic, stopping cars and asking to call the police as his phone's battery was dead. They identified the victim by fingerprints and driver's license. It was 28-year-old Cory Desmond. Subjected to a brutal attack, the woman died from strangulation. She had a lot of bruises on her face and neck and injuries to the back of her head. Cory tried to fight back as she had several defense wounds. Although unable to determine the exact time of death, the medical experts said Cory was on the street for about 12 to 36 hours before the man found her. Cory's pants were unbuttoned and pulled to her knees, but no signs of intimate contact were found. The first conclusion that investigators came to was that the place where the driver found Cory's body was not the place of her death. The criminal left her body by the side of the road, hoping it would take time to find it. Before the man found her body, the rain destroyed all possible evidence. Reporting bad news to the families of the dead or missing is perhaps the hardest thing in the work of a policeman. At that time, Cory was living with her grandmother. The news about the granddaughter's body found in a garbage bag shocked the woman. And this news was no less devastating for Mark, Cory's father. Mark knew perfectly well how the system worked. Sometimes the police delay the investigation for many months because they need a warrant to conduct searches, interrogations, and fingerprinting. There are cases when time-consuming bureaucracy slows down the process of solving a crime. Therefore, Mark decided not to sit and wait for the police to find the person who deprived him of his daughter. He decided to act. He said love for his daughter gave him the strength to look for the criminal. Mark found Cory's Jeep Wrangler in an alley next to the bar where she worked. He also discovered that Cory disappeared on the night of February 15th. But unfortunately, no one knew about it. Grandma did not panic because Cory was already an adult and could stay overnight with a friend or friends. In addition, she often worked late into the night and came home when her grandmother was already asleep. Investigators went to the bar where Desmond worked to find possible witnesses or leads. They talked to other employees and learned that Cory finished her shift at 9:30 p.m. and then went to another bar. She often did that. Her friends worked at that bar, and Cory often visited them at the end of her shift. She helped at the bar or chatted with friends while sitting at the counter. Besides, it brought her extra tips. Bar visitors knew her face well, and many perceived Cory as another employee. Surveillance cameras confirmed the words of the visitors. They captured the girl helping her friends at the bar. Unfortunately, a bartender's job is not only to pour drinks and entertain the interlocutors. Sometimes, after drinking alcohol, some people stop controlling their emotions and their behavior becomes inappropriate. That evening, Cory was unlucky enough to meet such a person. According to eyewitnesses, she argued with some man who behaved provocatively. He bothered women and unceremoniously touched them, making unflattering compliments. While everyone was silent and did not dare to put this man in his place, Cory stood up for the bar's visitors. In other words, the girl explained to the man that he was not welcome there. The violent guest was furious but still agreed to leave. Cory continued to help her friends and made drinks at the bar as if nothing had happened. That evening, she consumed alcohol, but it did not affect her behavior. After 2 a.m., she left the bar alone and planned to go home. But as we now know, a man found Cory's lifeless body 100 miles from the bar the next day. Mark gave the police all the information he could find. Through television, he appealed to everyone to report any crucial information for the investigation. Meanwhile, the police identified the man Cory quarreled with before her death. During a conversation with investigators, the man said he did not know who Cory Desmond was. However, he did not deny having a big fight with the girl in a bar on February 14th. The man said alcohol made him uncontrollable, confirming that they kicked him out of the bar. Right after that, he went home to sleep. The suspect denied any involvement in the crime. He agreed to take a polygraph test and let the police search his house and car. They carefully examined the suspect's car. After all, there could have been traces like bloodstains, hair, or something belonging to Cory. The car was dirty both inside and outside, and yet forensic experts did not find any evidence there. While searching the man's house, they found nothing indicating his involvement in the crime. The last hope of the investigators to catch the man in a lie was a polygraph test. But the man passed it without much difficulty, answering all the questions of the police. In addition, his wife confirmed that he came home before 2 a.m. and immediately went to bed. Cory left the bar around 2 a.m., which means this man was not involved in her death. Thus, the police excluded him from the list of suspects. But the problem was that they had no other persons of interest in this investigation. They studied Cory's personal life, trying to find out if she had enemies who could wish her harm. Investigators found out another strange detail. The owner of the bar where Cory worked said that that night, she came and asked for permission to use the toilet. But since the bar was closed, he refused the girl's request and advised her to go home. It was about 2:20 in the morning. What happened next remained a mystery because Cory never got in the car and did not go home. Investigators assumed that she had been abducted or assaulted near her place of work. However, the bar's surveillance cameras did not record this, and there were no witnesses on the street at such a late hour. At the time of Cory's death, her blood alcohol content was more than 4 times the legal limit for driving. It was unclear whether she planned to use her car or was looking for other ways to get home. Unfortunately, she did not meet anyone who would help her that night. A month later, the investigation reached a dead end. The police checked all the versions and clues but found no new suspects. Cory's father, Mark, wasn't going to give up. He rented 3 billboards on Artesia Boulevard in Redondo Beach. The billboards contained a photo of his daughter with the question, "Who killed Cory Desmond?" The man offered a $15,000 reward for any information helpful to the police. "I'm going to keep them up there to let people know the guy is still out there," Mark Desmond said. "Maybe it will save somebody." To some extent, this story is similar to the one of Alexandra Kemp. The latter's father, Roger, did everything to find the criminal, and billboards played a crucial role in solving the crime. Information about Cory periodically appeared on 50 electronic billboards. Eventually, it brought results. In May 2009, the phone rang at the police station. A woman named Tiffany saw one of the billboards with a photo of Cory. Thanks to this woman, the police were able to solve this case. Tiffany spoke very quietly. The woman was experiencing stress and severe fright. She rambled as if she didn't know where to start. Then she finally focused and said, "Hello, my name is Tiffany. I think my boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, killed that bartender girl, Cory Desmond. Please check him. He's behaving strangely, but I'll tell you more when we meet." Tiffany called several times to arrange a meeting with the detective. During their conversation in the park, the woman told him about her suspicions. According to her, on February 14th, she and Tony planned a romantic Valentine's Day dinner. She spent the whole evening preparing for a date. Tiffany took the children to their grandparents, visited a beauty salon, and bought a new red dress. Tony loved it when she wore red clothes. It drove him crazy. The guy was working that day but had to return home around 11:30 p.m. Tiffany waited for Tony almost all night. The woman tried to contact him, but he did not answer calls and messages. Tony returned home at 4:30 in the morning and, as if nothing had happened, said he was too drunk to go home. He said he fell asleep in his car. Tiffany mentioned that Tony rarely cleaned the interior of his car. However, after a few days, he bought a whole set of cleaning products. He washed the car thoroughly, not letting her help. The guy's behavior seemed strange, but at that moment, she did not attach much importance to it. A few days later, Tony sold his white Dodge for almost nothing and bought another car. He also changed his phone number for no apparent reason. A little later, they had a joint trip to Big Bear Lake. They chatted along the way and everything seemed normal until Tony suddenly stopped the car on the side of the road. He turned to Tiffany and asked her, "Do you think this dead girl, what was her name, the bartender, was dumped here? I'm almost 100% sure that the police found her body here." Tony Lopez Perez and Tiffany lived together for about 4 years. They had a 6-year-old son together, but they never married. He was a hardworking man and got along well with everyone. He has never had any problems with the law. Perez came from a large family with 8 siblings. His parents grew up in the LA area, and Perez attended high school in Manhattan Beach. Tony's absence on the day of Cory's death, cleaning the car and urgently selling it, a strange trip, and an equally strange comment about where the police found her body, a change of phone number and odd behavior. Putting all these facts together, Tiffany realized that Tony could be the one who took the life of Cory Desmond. She didn't want to believe it. The investigators decided to talk to Tony and went to his house. To prevent him from suspecting anything, Tiffany agreed to play along with the police, not telling him anything about this conversation. It looked as if they were conducting a routine interview of people to find witnesses in the Cory Desmond case. Tony looked calm, like a person with nothing to hide. He wasn't nervous while answering all the questions. He said he didn't know her, mentioning he had only seen Cory in the newspapers. However, to arrest Tony Lopez Perez for taking the life of Cory, they needed hard evidence. Thus, the police found the new owner of the Dodge that Tony sold shortly after the news of Cory's death. The new owner confirmed that Tony sold him his car for a low price. He allowed the police to check the vehicle for any evidence. Tiffany said Tony cleaned the interior thoroughly before selling his car. However, when the experts applied luminol and used an ultraviolet lamp, it became evident why Tony Lopez Perez got rid of his car. The interior of the car lit up in bright blue. Police asked Tony to come to the police station. They didn't tell him anything about the find, so he wouldn't run away. At first, he claimed he had never seen Cory, but later changed his testimony, saying he saw her near the bar and whistled at her. As soon as the police noticed that the man was changing his testimony, they showed him photos of the car he had sold and said that they had found crucial evidence there. This time, Tony claimed to have seen Cory outside the bar. Standing under a street lamp, she suddenly lost consciousness and fell on the sidewalk. He tried to help her, but she did not regain consciousness. Then he started slapping Cory on the cheeks. Cory opened her eyes and started screaming. She told him to get out and asked him to let her go. According to Tony, he got scared, put his hands over her mouth, and accidentally strangled her. Fearing he would get blamed for Cory's death, he put her body in the back seat of his car and drove home. Perez said he woke up during the night and went outside to see if it was a nightmare. "I opened the door and it was not a nightmare," Perez told detectives. It was true. Perez said he went back inside and tried to get some sleep. In the morning, he went to work with Desmond's body still in the back seat. At the end of the working day, he placed her body in 2 garbage bags, took it to a remote area, and left it next to the side of the road. According to Tony's story, what he did to Cory was an accident. He claimed that he was drunk and scared. He accidentally strangled her in a state of panic, but Cory's injuries suggested otherwise. She had severe injuries on the back of her head, bruises on her face and neck, and defense wounds on her hands. Moreover, Cory's pants were down to her knees. Tony Perez was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The next day, he showed the police where he dumped Cory's body. In addition to Tony's confession, they now had the results of DNA tests. Cory's blood matched the blood found in the car that Tony sold immediately after committing the crime. At the 2011 trial, Coroner Jack Sheridan testified to the multiple contusions to the victim's head, the evidence of strangulation, and the blunt force trauma to her face. Sheridan also said she had scratches on her body that suggested the criminal dragged her after her death. Based on Cory's injuries, prosecutors said Perez assaulted her and tried to force her into intimacy in the early morning of February 15, 2009. Cory resisted. Unable to get what he wanted, Perez strangled her. Tiffany Ware testified during the trial. She told the San Bernardino County jury that her former boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, had an insatiable appetite for sex in January and February 2009, even though they were making love almost every day, where said Perez was still not satisfied. Tiffany also told the court that Tony had twice engaged in intimacy with her against her will. It happened after the birth of their son and with an interval of about a month. Both incidents occurred when she was fast asleep on the couch after taking painkillers due to severe back pain. Perez, who chose not to testify at the trial, made his first statements to the court during his sentencing. He said he was taught to love and respect those around him, but that he veered off course at times. I forgot the key lessons I was taught about in life, which make me a man, a father, a loving uncle to many and a responsible person who supports his family that I so love, Perez said. In the end, I fell short. He generally stuck to the story his attorney Andrew Hanel presented at the trial, that he was scared and didn't mean to hurt Desmond. Hanel argued to a jury of 6 men and 6 women that Perez found her passed out on the sidewalk. He said he tried to calm her down and didn't mean to kill her. I should have thought before acting, Perez said. I should have stepped back and cleared my head. Fear took over. I was so scared, so careless. Cory's father, Mark Desmond, said his daughter had a beautiful future ahead of her before her life was cut short at the age of 28. Tony Perez should live the rest of his miserable life knowing he killed his own children's hopes and dreams at the same time he was killing Cory, her father said. He embodies all the characteristics that women in society fear. Just before sentencing, Perez asked God in the court to show him mercy. My very deepest apologies to the Desmond family and to my own family. I have brought such hurt and sorrow to the Desmonds that will forever shape their life. I hope he never gets out in the street again, said Desmond's grandmother Beverly. I hope he suffers as much as she suffered. In July 2011, a jury of 6 men and 6 women found 36-year-old Tony Lopez Perez guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Cory Desmond's family expressed gratitude to Tiffany Ware, thanks to whom the police solved this case. If it hadn't been for her, I don't think they would have ever found out it was him, said Leslie Schwab, a family friend who attended every day of the trial, along with about a dozen others in San Bernardino County. Shafilea Ahmed was born on July 14, 1986, a British Pakistani girl. Shafilea's father, Iftikhar Ahmed, originally hailed from the Gujarat district of Pakistan. At the age of about 20 to 22, Iftikhar moved to Britain for employment. While staying there for a while and during work, Iftikhar falls in love with a foreign girl and marries her. Soon he becomes a father. When he returns to Pakistan and informs his family about his marriage, they do not accept it. Then Iftikhar's family puts heavy pressure on him to marry another Pakistani girl. Despite Iftikhar's resistance, he eventually succumbs to his family's insistence and he marries a Pakistani girl named Farzana. After the marriage, Iftikhar returns to Britain and after revealing the truth to his first wife, divorces her. Then, after some time, Iftikhar calls his second wife Farzana to Britain from Pakistan. After coming to Britain, Iftikhar starts living with his wife in the city of Bradford in West Yorkshire. It is here that on July 14, 1986, Shafilea Ahmed is born. Shortly after Shafilea's birth, the family moves to the town of Warrington in Britain. It is here that Shafilea completes her early education. During this time, 2 more daughters are born in the family and Iftikhar's family grows larger. Although this family resides in Britain on holidays, Iftikhar used to take his wife and all his children to Pakistan for vacation. Now the year had come, 2003, and by now Shafilea Ahmed had also turned 17 and was studying the law. Her dream was to become a lawyer. When Shafilea and the other children have a break on February 18, 2003, Shafilea comes to Pakistan with her family for vacation. During their trip to Pakistan, this family also participates in a family wedding ceremony. However, just a few days after this wedding, a major incident occurs with Shafilea. She accidentally drinks phenylflora cleaner. Actually, phenyl is commonly used in Asia for cleaning floors and homes. Now, because phenyl is made by mixing some chemicals and soap, drinking it causes severe pain in Shafilea's throat. The reason behind Shafilea drinking phenyl is initially said to be because her parents pressured her into arranged marriage with a Pakistani boy. Because of this pressure, Shafilea drank the phenyl intending to end her life. But later, her parents claimed that someone had poured phenyl into an old bottle of water, kept in the same bottle usually used for drinking water. And in the darkness of the night, Shafilea mistook phenyl for water. and drank it. Due to this mistake, Shafilea had to endure a lot of pain. As a result, she's admitted to a hospital in Pakistan. Now, because Shafilea's injury was quite severe, she has to stay in the hospital for a long time. During this time, the holidays of other family members also end. So Iftikhar takes his 2 children and wife back to Britain, while Shafilea has to stay in Pakistan for treatment. However, shortly after, Iftikhar arranges for Shafilea's return as well, and on May 27, 2003, Shafilea returns to Britain. Straight from the airport, Shafilea is admitted to a hospital for treatment through an ambulance. After several months of treatment, Shafilea's throat heals considerably, and now she rejoins college. Alongside college, she also starts a part-time job. But on September 18, 2003, college teacher notices that Shafilea Ahmed hasn't been coming to college for the past week. Attempts are made to contact Shafilea via phone, but she cannot be reached. When teacher asked about this to Shafilea's parents, they revealed that Shafilea has not been home for the past week. Their daughter has been missing for a week, and her parents hadn't filed any complaints about her yet, which strikes Shafilea's teacher as very strange. Immediately after this, they inform the police. Upon filing the case, a police team arrives at Shafilea's house for investigation, and questioning begins with her parents. Shafilea's parents say that they last saw Shafilea at their home on September 11, 2003, and since then, she hasn't been seen. Upon this, the police ask, when your daughter has been missing for a week, why haven't you filed a complaint with the police yet? To this, Shafilea's parents respond, this is not the first time Shafilea has been missing from home for a few days. It has happened several times before. To confirm this, when the police checked the records, it is revealed that Shafilea has been missing from home several times in the past. The first time was when Shafilea was only 12 years old. She went missing with her younger sister on March 10, 1998. Because of this, her parents had also filed a missing report for both their daughters with the police. However, at that time, Shafilea returned home with her sister as evening approached. According to records, Shafilea ran away from home for the second time on November 25, 2002. Once again, her father, Iftikhar Ahmed, filed a missing report for his daughter. After extensive searching, Shafilea was found by the police sitting in a park. According to police records, for the third time, Shafilea left home with a friend on February 3, 2003. This time, Shafilea did not return home for 2 days, and then on February 5, 2003, she went to a safe house for orphan people and filed a report against her parents for domestic violence and mental abuse. After the report was filed, the police officer spoke with Shafilea Ahmed and her parents, and after everything was cleared up, Shafilea returned home. After this, on February 18, 2003, Shafilea, along with her 2 sisters and parents, goes to Pakistan for a family function and disappears from there shortly after returning to Britain. Now, looking at old records, the police also suspect that Shafilea Ahmed may have gone somewhere again this time and will return home in a few days. Therefore, the police try to find Shafilea in all those places where she could have gone. However, even after a few days, the police cannot find any trace of Shafilea from anywhere. Considering Shafilea's history of running away from home before, the police show a little laziness in the investigation this time. After this, some local media start making an issue out of the police's laziness. As a result, demand for a thorough search for Shafilea increases at the local level. Due to the progress in the Shafilea missing case, the police accelerate their investigation. Subsequently, they discover numerous poems written by Shafilea at her home. These poems reveal her dissatisfaction with her household environment. Her parents wished for Shafilea to lead a traditional Pakistani girl's life, but she favored Western culture. Through her poetry, she expressed this pain. As Shafilea's poems reach the public, the case gains momentum, putting pressure on the police to find her. Consequently, law enforcement intervenes, intensifying their search efforts in places Shafilea could have visited. Eventually, CCTV footage confirmed Shafilea's identity to her parents, confirming that the girl in the footage is indeed Shafilea Ahmed. A few days after Shafilea went missing, her parents identified her. This made the police believe that at least Shafilea was alive. However, a new turn in the case occurs when the CCTV footage shows Shafilea's class teacher. Actually, when the picture is shown to Shafilea's class teacher, they say that the girl in the photo is not Shafilea Ahmed. Some other people also confirm by watching the CCTV footage that the girl in the footage is not Shafilea. Now the police find it very strange that Shafilea's parents themselves did not recognize their daughter from the CCTV footage. The police had many questions in their minds, and to find the answers to those questions, they secretly installed some audio recording devices at Shafelea's home. The police were listening to everything that was happening in Shafelea's house through an audio recording device. According to the recording, one day Iftikhar is heard saying, "In Britain, if you kill 40 people and there is no evidence against you, then the law here can't do anything to you." Additionally, one day Iftikhar Ahmed is heard saying, "If the police collect DNA samples from inside the car, what could happen?" Furthermore, the audio recording device captures some suspicious conversations that lead the police to suspect that perhaps Shafelea's father had something to do with his daughter. Now, because the police start to doubt Iftikhar Ahmed, they use his audio recordings as evidence, and on December 18, 2003, the police arrest Iftikhar and his wife Farzana Ahmed, along with 5 other family members on charges of murdering Shafilea and hiding her body. The police had arrested these people solely on suspicion. The police hoped that during the investigation, some concrete evidence would be found against these peoples. However, no evidence was found against any of the arrested persons, and eventually the police released them all. It had been a year since 2004, and there was still no evidence in the case of Shafilea Ahmed. The police were engaged in efforts to locate Shafilea. Meanwhile, floods occurred in the famous Kent River, flowing from the Sedgwick area of Britain. When the floods were under control, the body of a girl were found in extremely poor condition on the banks of this river. The distance between the place where the body was found and where Shafilea Ahmed had disappeared was 70 miles. But still, the police have doubts whether this corpse could be Shafelea's. However, to confirm this, DNA samples are collected from the dead body and then matched with the DNA of Iftikhar and Fazan. In this case, a major twist occurs when a body washed away in the flood matches with the DNA samples of Iftikhar. This meant that the body washed away from the river was not someone else's but Shafilea Ahmed's, meaning in the search for Shafilea Ahmed, whom the police had been looking for the past year, now reaches the police itself in the form of a corpse. Now, the biggest question in front of the police was who and why murdered Shafilea Ahmed. However, even before the statements and actions of corpse's parents, there were doubts, and in 2003, these 2, along with 5 others, were arrested. Therefore, once again, Shafelea's parents are arrested and questioned. The trial of this case is also going on, but even this time, no allegations can be proven against them, which leads the police to release them again. However, after that, the police detain some other suspects and proceed with the investigation against all of them. But despite many efforts, the police cannot reach the murderer. As time passes, people slowly start to forget about Shafilea Ahmed's case. Shafilea disappeared in 2003, and now it was 2010. That is, it had been 7 years since Shafelea's death. By now, Shafelea's family had also moved on from the incident and had become busy with their daily lives. But then on August 25, 2010, a major theft occurs at Iftikhar Ahmed's house. By now, Iftikhar Ahmed's family had already become the center of attention in the city due to their daughter's disappearance. Due to this, when theft occurs in this house, it starts making headlines on the front page of newspapers. But once again, this puts heavy pressure on the police. Despite working honestly, the police quickly get involved in the search for the thief. After many days of hard work, the police make a revelation that surprises everyone. Actually, the police arrest not someone else, but Iftikhar Ahmed's daughter, Alicia Ahmed, on charges of theft in the house. In fact, Alicia was Shafelea's younger sister. According to Alicia, she didn't get as much money from home as she demanded and needed. Because of this, she orchestrated the theft of her father's money at her own home. However, police had solved the theft case very quickly. But the police spot an opportunity here and now. They start talking to Alicia about her sister Shafilea, who disappeared many years ago, and reopen the file related to the Shafilea case. In the initial conversation, the police suspect that Alicia knows something about the disappearance of Shafilea that the world is still unaware of. The police officers try to uncover what happened with Shafilea, but Alicia refuses to cooperate with them. However, the police then tell Alicia, "You have orchestrated a theft in your own house, which could lead to a long prison sentence for you. But if you can provide any information about Shafilea that nobody else knows, your sentence could be significantly reduced." Afterwards, when Alicia reveals some details to the police, everyone is left stunned. Alicia explains, "It was not someone else but my father, Iftikhar, and my mother Farzana Ahmed, who had beaten Shafilea Ahmed in front of all of us sisters. Then our father put polyfine on her face, and due to suffocation, she was dead. Then he placed Shafelea's body in his car and threw it into the distant jungle. However, due to the flood, the body drifted to the river bank from the jungle." According to Alicia, Iftikhar and Farzara did not like their daughter's modern lifestyle at all. On the surface, Shafilea started falling in love with a boy. And when this matter comes to light, Iftikhar and Farzana quickly try to arrange Shafilea's marriage with their preferred boy. When the family goes to Pakistan for a family function, there is an attempt to forcefully marry Shafilea to a boy there. But Shafilea refuses to marry for this reason, and she consumes fennel. After that, her health deteriorates and her marriage does not happen either. When Shafilea returns to Britain, her family members here also insist on arranging her marriage with a boy of their choice. But when Shafilea repeatedly refuses this marriage, her father gets angry and at first beats Shafilea in anger and then covers her face with a polythene bag. And then due to suffocation, Shafilea Ahmed dies here. But immediately after this disclosure, Shafilea Ahmed becomes a government witness in the case. In exchange, she is assured a minimum sentence in the theft case. However, based on Alicia's statement on September 2, 2010, Farzana and Iftikhar are arrested, and then a case of their own daughter's murder is pursued against them. Both of them remain in jail for several months after the arrest. However, nearly a year later, on September 15, 2011, they are granted bail by the Manchester Crown Court. In the further investigation, the police gather some crucial evidence, and based on that evidence, the trial of this case begins in the Chester Crown Court on May 21, 2012. Initially, Farzana and Iftikhar continue to deny their involvement in their daughter's murder, but when Farzana begins to suspect that she is being framed for her own daughter's murder, she finally accepts in court on July 9, 2012, that Shafilea Ahmed's murder was not committed by anyone else but by Iftikhar Ahmed himself. In her statement, Farzana also reveals that she tried to stop Iftikhar, but instead, Iftikhar beat and threatened her family, saying, "If any of you ever talk about this to anyone, your fate will be just like Shafilea's." Now 2 witnesses had testified against Iftikhar Ahmed. Besides, the police who gather evidence also indicate that it was Iftikhar Ahmed who murdered Shafilea, then threw her body far into the jungle. However, a natural disaster struck that area, and with the floodwaters, Shafilea's body drifted and reached the riverbank on its own. After a lengthy trial in August 2012, Farzana and Iftikhar are found guilty of murdering their own daughter and disposing of her body after the murder. They are then sentenced to 25 years each. It is also proven in court that this was an honor killing. Following this verdict, every year on July 14th, Shafilea Ahmed's birthday, the National Day of Memory for Victims of Honor Killings, is observed in her memory. So with this, the case of Shafilea Ahmed comes to a close. However, perhaps nature also desired that Shafilea Ahmed receive justice and her killers be punished. Therefore, albeit late, Shafilea's parents, her murderers, are also sentenced. Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. were a joyful family, living in a lovely new home in Fallbrook, California. Joseph, the family's main provider, ran a successful decorative fountain business. February 4, 2010, began as a regular day for the family. Joseph called his father, Patrick, to explain that he was running late for a business lunch. Meanwhile, Summer had been in touch with her sister, who had recently given birth, telling her that she was busy setting things up in their new home. Over the next few days, communication from Joseph and Summer to their relatives abruptly stopped. While some thought it was simply due to their busy lives and caring for 2 young children, Joseph's father, Patrick, found the situation odd. He had a close relationship with his son and wasn't used to being ignored. As his concern grew, he asked his other son, Michael, to check on Joseph's home. At first, Michael didn't share the same level of worry, believing that his brother was simply caught up in daily tasks and would reconnect soon. Patrick, however, persisted, and eventually Michael agreed to visit the house. When Michael arrived, he noticed that the family car was gone, but their dogs were still at the house, seemingly uncared for. The doors were locked, but Michael managed to get inside through a window. Inside, things were off. There was spoiled food in the kitchen and popcorn scattered in the living room. Despite these oddities, Michael initially thought the family had gone on a trip. However, it was unusual that they hadn't told anyone, so Michael alerted the authorities to his brother's disappearance. The police found no sign of forced entry or violence, though it seemed the family had left in a hurry. By February 8th, the family's car was discovered abandoned near the border crossing between the US and Mexico. Surveillance footage from the border showed a family of 4 walking into Mexico, but the video quality was poor, leaving the police uncertain if it was indeed the McStays. Further investigation revealed that Summer had recently searched for information about Mexico on her computer, leading to speculation that the family had left voluntarily. However, Joseph's father, Patrick, firmly believed that his son would never leave without informing anyone. Joseph's mother, after viewing the footage, was sure the man shown was not Joseph, based on his walk. Michael and Susan took over Joseph's business, while Patrick felt increasingly left out, especially as he was estranged from Susan and had little contact with Michael. Months passed with no solid leads, and the case was handed over to the FBI by April 2010. Unfortunately, the authorities still considered the family's disappearance a voluntary departure, resulting in a lack of exhaustive efforts to find them. The absence of any clear evidence of a crime also prevented police from obtaining access to Joseph's financial records. For more than 3 years, the case remained cold until November 13, 2013, when a motorcyclist stumbled upon a horrific discovery while riding in the Mojave Desert. He found what appeared to be a child's skull and promptly notified the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department. Upon further investigation, authorities uncovered 2 shallow graves containing the remains of 4 people, 2 adults, and 2 children. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. Alongside the remains, a 3-pound sledgehammer was found, identified as the murder weapon. Forensic examinations concluded that the family had died from blunt force trauma, likely having been tortured before their deaths. The autopsy revealed that young Joseph Jr. had suffered multiple severe blows to the head, while Joseph Sr. was found with an electrical cord wrapped around his neck. With this grim discovery, the case took a dark turn and was now considered a homicide. Investigators began reconstructing the family's final months by interviewing friends, family, and examining phone records and security footage. A key breakthrough came when security footage from a neighbor's camera revealed that the last person to meet with Joseph on February 4th was his business partner, Charles Chase Merritt. Prior to the discovery of the bodies, Chase had been interviewed by authorities, during which he claimed to have spoken with Joseph on the phone at least twice on the day of the disappearance. Chase had also told the media that Joseph was his best friend, and in one interview, he mentioned being the last person to see Joseph, a statement that raised suspicion among detectives. Chase's behavior after the disappearance was concerning. In an early police interview, he referred to Joseph in the past tense, saying, "He was my best friend." When questioned about this after the bodies were found, Chase claimed he hadn't realized he was speaking that way. Chase had also told police that on February 4th, he and Joseph had a business meeting over lunch to discuss financial matters. During that meeting, Chase said Joseph gave him physical copies of checks for ongoing projects. Further investigation into these checks revealed discrepancies. Digital records indicated that while the checks were dated February 4th, they had actually been written several days after the family disappeared. This led investigators to suspect that Chase had forged the checks to make it appear as though they had been issued before the disappearance. Moreover, detectives uncovered that Chase had a gambling addiction and had been stealing money from Joseph's business accounts for months. It was speculated that Joseph had discovered this, leading to tension between the two and possibly providing Chase with a motive for murder. Police later uncovered that Chase had also issued checks totaling over $21,000 from Joseph McStay's business account in the days following the family's murder. Merritt then went on gambling sprees, losing significant amounts of money in casinos. A bank's customer service employees also revealed to investigators that someone claiming to be Joseph McStay had called to request the complete deletion of his account and all related information. However, the caller failed to provide the correct password, so the request couldn't be processed. When authorities traced the call, they discovered it came not from Joseph's phone, but from Charles Merritt's. Further investigation revealed that on February 1st, Joseph had sent an email claiming that Chase owed him almost $43,000. Adding to this, cell phone data placed Merritt in the Mojave Desert 2 days after the McStay family disappeared. Authorities believed Merritt knew the area well, having grown up nearby. During the investigation, police also received a DNA profile from the McStay family car. DNA found on the steering column and gear shift matched Charles Merritt. With mounting evidence against Merritt, detectives concluded that he had murdered the McStay family. The theory proposed by investigators was that Merritt had killed the family with a sledgehammer, transported their bodies to the Mojave Desert, and buried them in shallow graves. He then drove the family's car to the border near Mexico, abandoning it there to mislead investigators into believing that the family had fled to Mexico. It's also believed that Merritt was the one who conducted searches about Mexico on Summer's computer. On November 5, 2014, Charles Merritt was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. Though he vehemently denied the accusations, he was arrested and brought to trial. However, the trial faced numerous delays as Merritt fired several of his attorneys and even attempted to represent himself at one point. Over the span of 2 years, he cycled through 5 different lawyers. The trial finally began on January 7, 2019. Prosecutors entered the trial confident in their case, presenting substantial evidence linking Merritt to the murders, along with a clear motive. They argued that Joseph had confronted Merritt about the money he had been stealing from the business, threatening to report him to the authorities. Merritt, who had a criminal record involving theft and fraud, panicked, fearing a lengthy prison sentence. As a result, prosecutors suggested he decided to kill Joseph and his entire family to silence them. The prosecution believed that Merritt first killed Joseph and then lured Summer and the children to their deaths. After murdering the family, Merritt hid the bodies for 2 days, during which time he accessed Joseph's bank account and issued the fraudulent checks. On February 6th, he allegedly transported the bodies to the desert, dug 2 shallow graves, and buried them along with the murder weapon. He later abandoned the family car near the border, though his DNA left inside the vehicle would become crucial evidence. During the trial, the prosecution presented security footage that supposedly showed Merritt's truck leaving the McStay residence. However, the video was blurry, leading to debate over whether it truly was Merritt's truck. The defense seized on this and other inconsistencies, including the unclear location of the murders. Prosecutors could not definitively say if the killings occurred in the family home or elsewhere, such as the desert. Merritt's defense team argued that he had an alibi. His girlfriend at the time testified that Merritt was with her at home on the night of February 4, 2010. His daughter also stated that she remembered her father being home that night. As for Merritt's cell phone data placing him in the Mojave Desert on February 6th, the defense explained that he could have been in the area to visit his sister. Juanita, Chase's sister, testified that her brother frequently visited her, though she couldn't recall if he had visited on that specific day. However, prosecutors confronted Juanita with a recorded police interview from 2013, in which she claimed that Charles rarely visited her and hadn't done so for 5 years, which contradicted her trial testimony. The defense also tried several tactics to derail the trial, including accusing prosecutors of withholding evidence and requesting that key figures in the case be removed. However, the judge overseeing the case rejected these motions, allowing the trial to proceed. Chase Merritt's defense attorneys argued that the prosecution failed to thoroughly investigate other individuals who had motives to harm Joseph McStay. They pointed to 3 men they considered persons of interest, with the first being Joseph's brother, Michael McStay. When Michael took the stand, Charles Merritt's attorney asked him several pointed questions, suggesting he could be responsible for the crime. The lawyer inquired about Michael's relationship with his brother, to which both Michael and the rest of the family asserted that it was good. However, the defense raised doubts, questioning why Michael did not immediately go to check on his brother's home and why he was slow to report the family's disappearance. In response, Michael admitted that he hadn't been overly concerned at first, thinking his brother had simply gone on a trip with his family. The defense also suggested that the truck seen in the security footage could have been Michael's, not Charles'. But a particularly strange detail that led some people to suspect Michael was that before the family's bodies were found, he told officers that he hoped they weren't buried in shallow graves. This statement caused significant debate, as the McStay family was indeed discovered in shallow graves in the Mojave Desert. Many found it suspicious that Michael could have imagined this scenario with such accuracy. However, Joseph and Michael's parents dismissed the comment as an unfortunate coincidence, while others found it highly unusual. In addition to Michael, the defense also pointed the finger at Joseph's other business partner, a man named Dan Kavanaugh, who managed Joseph's online sales. Dan, known as Dan the Hacker due to his computer expertise, worked with Joseph to promote and sell their products online. His compensation was a percentage of the online sales. Dan had previously been on police radar when his ex-girlfriend Tracy accused him of confessing to the murders in early 2018. Tracy's claims were dismissed, however, as she had a history of substance abuse and was on bad terms with Dan, leading the authorities to believe she might be trying to falsely incriminate him. According to Charles Merritt's defense team, Dan had a strong motive to harm Joseph. At the end of 2009, Joseph and Dan had clashed over profit distribution. Dan believed he was entitled to a share of not just the online sales, but all sales, while Joseph disagreed and initially refused to pay more. Dan allegedly threatened to ruin Joseph's online business by redirecting his website's traffic to adult sites. Ultimately, Joseph agreed to give Dan more money, including his BMW and additional payments. The last of these payments was due around the time of the family's disappearance. After the murders, Dan continued to work with Susan, Michael, and Charles to keep the business running, but he later sold the company in June 2011, pocketing over $100,000. The defense argued that Dan's exclusion from certain projects and lack of payments could have pushed him over the edge. However, Dan had a solid alibi. He was vacationing in Hawaii with his girlfriend during the time of the murders. His ex-girlfriend testified that they were together on February 4, 2010, and posted photos to Facebook as evidence. While some people questioned the validity of social media posts as proof, the ex-girlfriend maintained that she had no reason to lie for Dan as they were no longer together and had parted on bad terms. The police eventually confirmed that Dan had indeed been in Hawaii at the time of the killings. During the trial, the defense also brought up Joseph's ex-wife's partner, suggesting that he too could have been involved. Joseph had a son named Jonah with his ex-wife, and tensions between Joseph and her new partner had escalated prior to the murders. Nevertheless, the police ruled him out as a suspect. Despite the defense's efforts to shift attention away from Charles Merritt by June 2019, the jury found Merritt guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder. Before the sentencing hearing, the victims' families gave emotional statements. Patrick, Joseph's father, addressed Merritt, saying that Joseph had done so much to help him and his family, particularly when Merritt faced legal troubles in 2009. Susan, Joseph's mother, called Merritt a despicable monster who had brutally killed 2 innocent children, her grandchildren. She labeled him a coward and a baby killer. Summer's sister tearfully shared how their family would forever be scarred by the loss of their loved ones. Joseph's eldest son, Jonah, also spoke, recounting the devastating impact of losing his father, stepmother, and younger siblings when he was just 12 years old. After hearing these victim impact statements, Merritt asked to speak. Through tears, he insisted on his innocence, declaring that he did not commit the murders and did not deserve what was happening to him. "I didn't do it," he said. "With God as my witness, I will prove everyone wrong." He added that he loved Joseph and would never have hurt him or his family. Merritt's sentencing was delayed after he once again requested to dismiss his attorney, though the judge rejected this motion. His legal team also filed for a new trial, accusing the prosecution of misconduct, but this request was also denied. Finally, on January 21, 2020, after years of delays, the San Bernardino Superior Court sentenced Charles Merritt, then 62 years old, to death. Despite the death sentence, it is unlikely that Merritt will ever be executed, as California has not carried out an execution since 2006. Instead, Merritt will likely spend the rest of his life in the death row. "71-year-old Robert Heron lived in Jackson, Mississippi with his 73-year-old wife, Annie Laurie. Annie was from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. She had grown up on 14th Street, and according to her cousin, she was one of the most popular, beautiful girls in Tuscaloosa, outstanding in every way. Robert and Annie had met while they were students at the University of Alabama. While at university, she had worked as the women's editor for the school newspaper Crimson White. Robert had also worked on the paper too. In 1940, Robert and Annie would marry. After the wedding, they moved to Jackson, Mississippi. During World War II, Robert joined the United States Navy, and upon his return, he worked for the U.S. Gas Company until 1955. The pair had 2 children together, a son, Robert Jr., and a daughter, Lori. Robert Heron was one of Mississippi's wealthiest residents. He was worth roughly $200 million. He was in charge of Mississippi Valley Gas Company, the largest gas distribution company in the state, Lamar Life Corporation, the second biggest insurance company, and the second biggest bank, Trustmark National Bank. Annie was frail, weighing 120 pounds and standing at 5 feet 4 inches, suffering from both arthritis and scoliosis. But she didn't let any of that stop her from being a huge part of her community. She devoted much of her time to various civic causes, making her popular and well-liked. She was the president of both the Jackson Junior League and the Jackson Opera Guild, was the co-chair of the Mississippi Arts Festival, and the patron of the Jackson Symphony. She and her husband also funded scholarships and colleges. Another one of Robert's business ventures was being the president of School Pictures, which sold franchises across the country. People would buy the franchise and then take and publish children's picture day photographs. The business ran into problems. In the early 1980s, they filed lawsuits against 12 franchise owners from across 8 different states. They were owed money and so started legal action to recover it. July 26, 1988 began as any other. Although he was in his 70s, Robert would often wake up at 4 a.m. to go to work. Both he and Annie were up early and the pair had breakfast together, just as they had done for the past 48 years. Every 2 weeks, Annie would host a bridge club at the house 139 Woodland Drive, and on this day this is exactly what happened. Bridge began at 10:15 and went on for several hours. The group spent their time playing, talking, and eating blueberry ice cream cake. At 2:30 p.m., her last guest left and the housekeeper left at 3. 90 minutes later at 4:30 p.m., Robert came home and saw her car was still parked on the drive. After checking the house, however, she wasn't there. He assumed that she had gone with her friends, however. By 7:30 p.m., she still hadn't come home. He called his son-in-law to help find her. They searched the house and the outside, but she was nowhere to be found. Robert called around other friends and family to see if they had seen or heard from her. Nobody had. She was a creature of habit, which made her sudden disappearance even more unusual. She always took her handbag with her whenever she went out. Worryingly, her bag and shoes were by her reading chair, as was the paper and her glasses. At 9:49 p.m., Robert called the police. They quickly descended on the scene. A sinister discovery was made. A letter by the door. It had been written on a typewriter, was littered with grammatical errors, and was directly addressed to Robert. It read, "Robert Heron. Put these people back in the shape they was in before they got mixed up with school pictures. Pay them whatever damages they want and tell them all this so they can know what you are doing. But don't tell them why you are doing it. Do this before 10 days pass. Don't call the police. If any is dead, pay his children." It then went on to list 12 names. They were the people that school pictures had taken legal action against regarding the unpaid debts. 11 of them were living and 1 had since died. The contents of the letter made it clear. His wife had been abducted. As it was apparent that the kidnapping was linked to Robert's business, the police needed to know of any enemies, and any that held a deep enough grudge that they would hurt his frail wife. Jackson Chief of Police J.R. Black said, "The note said not to call the police. However, Mr. Heron notified the police prior to the note being discovered. What was unusual about the letter was that the kidnapper was not demanding money for himself. He was demanding payment for other people. It didn't give a figure that needed to be paid. The lawsuits had been filed from the county court in Mississippi. Their names were a matter of public record and were easily available to the public, meaning the kidnapper didn't necessarily have to be one of the people listed on the ransom letter. Their son Robert Heron Jr. said, "We wanted to comply. We wanted to do everything we could to get mother back." Searches throughout the house continued. Drops of blood were found on the carpet alongside a smear of blood on the front door. It was discovered that the blood type was the same as Annie's. Investigators theorized that she had been overpowered by someone and potentially hit over the head with something. Something that the smeared blood also pointed to. Alongside having arthritis and scoliosis, Annie suffered with a chronic intestinal disease called teeth, which causes inflammation of the small intestine. If she failed to take her medication, she would die within a matter of days. Her medication was still in the bathroom. The case involved multiple law enforcement agencies, and they called on the help of the FBI that very night. Across the investigation, more than 100 FBI agents were brought in. The FBI contacted attorney James Tucker, who could advise them on the complex legal issues as the case continued to unfold. As day broke, evidence technicians and FBI officers were still trawling through the house, gathering as much evidence as possible, including handwriting samples and notepads, to see if the letter had been written using paper from inside the home. It also meant they could rule out any handwriting if more communications came through. They had officers tap the phone just in case the kidnappers called. Due to the nature of the case, the media put a 24-hour blackout on the story, and her abduction was not reported on. 36 hours had now passed since the abduction, and police were hopeful that the test carried out on the ransom letter would give them a solid lead. The paper didn't match any paper found inside the Heron residence. They also compared the typeface of the letter to every single typewriter manufactured in the 20th century. Tests confirmed that it was a Royal typewriter that had been made between 1912 and 1927. No other information or evidence could be garnered from the letter, including fingerprints. One of the Heron's neighbors, a doctor who lived down the street, reported to investigators that he had seen a white van parked near his house. He said he initially thought nothing more of it, but found it strange when he came home later and it was still parked in the same spot. He approached the driver of the van, who was reading a map, and asked if he needed anything. The driver was agitated and responded by asking if it was illegal to park in the neighborhood. A few minutes later, the van drove off. Another neighbor also had something interesting to tell the police. 3 months earlier in April, they too had seen a white van driving around. Both times, the van would have had a clear view of Robert and Annie's house. This neighbor found the van to be so out of place and odd that they made a note of the license plate. Officers ran checks on the plate, but discovered it had been stolen from a vehicle at New Orleans Airport. So this lead went nowhere. So determined were the FBI to find Annie, agents would actually move in with Roberts and live with him as the investigation continued. The police asked school pictures to go into their files and look at the records of the 12 people listed on the letter. They sent letters to the 11 surviving people asking what monetary damages they had and what, if anything, they wanted. They only got a handful of responses, with those who replied saying they didn't want anything. Within 3 days of the abduction, the FBI reached out to officers from areas that the 11 living people listed on the letter resided in to gather more information, and they began conducting surveillance operations on them. They needed to know if any of them had been in the area at the same time as the van or kidnapping. On the 3rd of August, the police made an announcement. They were looking for a Newton Alfred Wynn in connection with her disappearance. Wynn had been one of the names on the letter. Neighbors said that Wynn generally did match the driver of the van. And that very day, he went in front of a grand jury and said he had no knowledge of what had happened to Annie. The investigations continued. As the days passed without any more leads, agents spoke to Robert Heron, and it was agreed that a press conference would be held. More than 10 days after her abduction, Robert made an appeal to the kidnappers. The story quickly became news across the country, with major news outlets including the New York Times, Time magazine, and the Washington Post reporting on it. Following the press conference, the hope was that the kidnapper would be spurned into giving more information on how Annie could be released. It seemed to work. August 15, 1988. A letter arrived, postmarked from the 12th of August and from Atlanta, Georgia. The letter was dated August 10th. It said, "Bob, if you don't do what these people want you to do, they are going to seal me up in the cellar of this house with only a few jugs of water. Please save me. Annie Laurie." FBI experts said it was her handwriting. The language on the letter was unusual. Family members said she would have used the word basement and not cellar and bottles of water instead of jugs of water, making it apparent that the letter had been dictated to her. But this threw up another problem. If the wording of the letter had been decided upon by someone else, they had no way of knowing if the date of the letter was even accurate. It again was vague, and so in a desperate attempt to comply, Robert Heron had his lawyers find out exactly how much the people in the lawsuits had been sued for. He then sent them all checks. The amount paid out totaled $931,000. Half of the checks would be returned. With every check, he added a note begging for his wife's return. This lead would also go nowhere. Dr. Rodrigo Galvez, a pathologist and psychiatrist, was also brought on board to analyze the letter and help investigators determine what kind of person they were dealing with. He said, "I am absolutely sure she is dead." They got in touch with the behavioral science units where profilers determine the characteristics of people to help officers in their investigations. One of the profilers who examined the ransom letter confirmed that whoever had taken her was likely one of the people listed on the letter. The grammatical errors the profiler believed was a deliberate attempt by the kidnapper to throw investigators off the fence, as was the old typewriter. One particular phrase stood out to the profiler: "Pay them whatever damages they want." The use of the word damages was odd. It's a legal term indicating whoever had written it had some sort of legal background or knowledge of the law. According to the profiler, this was revenge against Robert Heron. Whoever the kidnapper was, they were paranoid and willing to go to any lengths, including murder. It was most likely a white, middle-aged male, someone working alone, or if they were working with someone, this man would have been in charge. Tom Montgomery, a special agent in Jacksonville, was drafted in to look at the one lawyer on the letter, Newton Alfred Wynn. After conducting the routine background checks, it was discovered that he had no criminal record. As part of the legal action taken by school pictures for the unpaid debts, Wynn had been ordered to pay $153,883 in 1984. Wynn either wouldn't or couldn't pay, so Robert Heron had gone back to court to seize property to pay off the debt. March 11th, 1989. Finally, the news came through that everyone had been waiting for. The FBI had made an arrest in a car park in DeLand, Florida. Newton Alfred Wynn was taken into custody. But who was he and what had led to this? Over the last few months, the FBI had been tracking him and had launched an elaborate undercover operation to catch him. He had been on their radar from very early on. Newton Alfred Wynn was a 65-year-old civil lawyer from St. Petersburg, Florida, who lived alone above his office. Officers had gone to interview him initially, and he said he had nothing to do with the case, and gave an alibi for the day of the kidnapping. saying he had been in a bar with a sex worker. He said he had called one of his paralegals and asked him to bring the money to the bar so he could go home with the sex worker. The paralegal arrived and handed the money over. Wynn said he didn't know either the sex worker's name, nor the bar they had been in. The next day they visited the paralegal, who confirmed Wynn's version of events. The paralegal said he too didn't know the name of the bar. Wynn had paid for the paralegal's training, and the paralegal was working on a very small salary, leaving officers to believe that there was a great deal of loyalty between them. Despite their protestations, agents would doubt for that they were being honest. The paralegal said that the issues between Wynn and School Pictures had started around 7 years before, when they had foreclosed on him. To try and avoid his debts, Wynn had tried to declare bankruptcy, not once, but 3 times. A court order was issued to pay off the debts. A U.S. Marshal seized items in stock, including his prized car. 3 weeks before Annie Heron had been abducted, had been told about an eviction hearing, but he put his foot down and said he wasn't going to leave. The paralegal said that becoming involved in School Pictures had ruined Wynn's life. They pulled information on the paralegal's vehicle and vehicles that belonged to friends and associates of Wynn. They found that the paralegal had a white van registered to him, a white van that Wynn had used. An agent went to speak with the previous owner of the van. She revealed that the person who had bought the van was Wynn. She described his behavior as strange, and he told her he didn't want his name linked to the van in any way, so she had left the buyer's name on the receipt blank. It was revealed that the van had been in a repair shop on the day Annie Heron had vanished. 1 week after the kidnapping, officers had the doctor who had seen the van driving around the area come to the station to see if he could pick out a photograph of the driver. He identified Newton Alfred Wynn. The other neighbor who had seen the van was also able to pick Wynn out as being the driver. They kept him under surveillance, hoping he would lead them to Annie Heron. When Robert Heron had sent the checks out following the handwritten letter from Annie, according to Wynn's paralegal, when Wynn opened the check to the sum of around $145,000 and read the note begging for Annie's return, he responded saying, "This is not what I wanted." What he wanted was his property back. Wynn sent the check back and added a note saying he hoped Robert would find his wife safe and well. 2.5 months after Annie's abduction, her case would be featured on the hit show Unsolved Mysteries. After the episode went out, hundreds of tips began to come in, and one in particular stood out. An anonymous caller contacted the police and told them that if a man called Newton Alfred Wynn was on the list, they needed to look at him. When agents realized she was a spiritual advisor, they weren't entirely sure, but soon learned she had a strong reputation amongst law enforcement and had helped them before. She explained to them that she had met Wynn 4 years ago. He had sought her advice about the issues he was having with School Pictures. She told him that the courts were the best way for him to pursue action against the company. He said he had already tried that. He said to her, he wanted to abduct the company's head and hold them hostage until his demands were met. He said he was looking for an accomplice and called her 6 weeks later to ask if she would do it. She refused. She gave the agents the record she had for her meeting with Wynn. She also agreed that she would contact him, arrange a meeting, and her office would be bugged. He agreed, and the meeting took place in December. She explained to him that she had seen that Annie Heron had been kidnapped and asked if he had played any part in it. He denied it, saying he had changed his mind. As soon as he left the office, FBI agents were hot on his tail, but he didn't lead them to Annie. The FBI also found out that he was the owner of a cabin located in swampland, and so they headed straight there hoping they would find her. But she was nowhere to be found. The FBI searched other properties and swamps in the vicinity, but there was no trace of Annie Heron. Newton Alfred Wynn sent thousands of documents to the IRS and told them to search for any disputed financial documents. Attorney James Tucker would say that this appeared to be an attempt at intimidation. In amongst all the paperwork, something sinister was found. Letters talking about a kidnap and murder plot. The IRS informed the FBI immediately. They were sent between Wynn and his ex-girlfriend and detailed a plan to abduct and murder her former husband. They even made reference to using an old typewriter to type out the ransom letter. They went to talk to her, and at first she denied any knowledge or involvement. She then came clean. She said that the plan to kill her ex-husband had been Wynn's idea, and when she realized he wasn't joking, she ended their relationship. She said that she had last spoken to him on August 6, 1988, when he asked to meet with her in DeLand, Florida. He asked her if she knew or thought she had been followed there, and he asked her if her car had been tapped. When she confirmed that she hadn't been followed and the car wasn't bugged, Wynn offered her $500 to travel across state lines to the state capital of Georgia, Atlanta. He wanted her to put a letter in the post for him. He had used gloves to remove a manila envelope from his pocket. This, he said, contained the letter to be mailed. It was wrapped in a gray napkin. Wynn told her to pay for a one-way flight to Georgia from Daytona Beach in cash and to use an assumed name. She explained that he had told her to change her appearance once she got to Atlanta. She was to talk to nobody and take public transport instead of a taxi to a post office in East Point. He told her to book a flight back to a different airport in Florida, also to be paid in cash. He told her not to touch or even look at the letter. All she had to do was put it in the mailbox. Based on his instructions, she had even used a fake Scandinavian accent to avoid detection. Despite his orders, however, she had seen the address on the envelope when she posted the letter, and was later able to confirm that the letter Robert had received from Annie was the one she had put in the post. This was just over 2 weeks after the kidnapping of Annie Heron. She told agents that she had got rid of the napkin on a deserted road and agreed to take them there. The chances of finding it there were slim, but unbelievably, the napkin was still there. His ex-girlfriend agreed to meet with him again at the request of the FBI. She would be wearing a wire. They had told her to be more forthright with him and tell him that she knew she was now implicated in a crime. Wynn denied everything and made no mention of Annie or the plot. When he got out of the car, officers moved in and took him into custody. A search of his office was conducted and a vintage typewriter was found. But tests determined it was not the one that had been used to write the ransom letter. It was believed that a different typewriter had been left at the office to confuse the investigation. In his office, they also found a business card for a car rental company. The company confirmed that he had rented white vans on 3 separate occasions. Whilst the dates of the rentals didn't match the day Annie was kidnapped, one of them did coincide with when the doctor had spoken to the man in the white van who was parked near the Heron home. Wynn was held at the Simpson County Jail while he awaited trial. He refused to have the court appoint a lawyer, but said he couldn't afford one of his own. He told Magistrate John R. Countess 3, "I used to have some money. I have nothing now." Judge Countess told him, "If I appoint you a lawyer, I'm going to appoint you one who will be competent and I believe will do you a good job." Judge Countess did appoint a local lawyer to advise Wynn, but he said he would represent himself. Judge Countess told him this was not a wise thing to do. Although he was a lawyer, he had never tried a federal criminal case. By this point, FBI agents still hadn't questioned him. Jackson FBI spokesman J. Stuart Murphy said, "We don't have a right to talk to him. He has a right to an attorney before he talks to anybody. He does not have an attorney appointed right now. It's kind of confusing." Judge Countess didn't set a bond for Wynn. Hinds County District Attorney's Office said they were considering if it was possible to file capital murder charges despite having no body. But this didn't happen. The federal trial began in Mississippi on January 29, 1990 and would last for 2 weeks, on federal charges of extortion by mail, perjury, and conspiracy to kidnap. Both the paralegal and his ex-girlfriend were told they would face no prosecution if they testified truthfully. It was revealed that by July 1988, papers had been filed by school pictures to evict Wynn from the apartment he lived in and the office he worked from. The prosecution said that the closer the eviction date came, the more determined he was to carry out the plan. The paralegal had taken 4 trips to Jackson. Wynn told him to watch the Heron house and take photographs. The paralegal admitted he had fabricated the alibi of the bar and the sex worker to protect Wynn, but said he knew nothing of and played no part in the kidnapping. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 40 minutes before they returned their verdict. Newton Alfred Wynn was found guilty on all 3 counts. When the jury's verdict came back, Wynn gave a slight smile and said, "What is there to say?" He was sentenced to 19 years and 7 months in prison. Her family and loved ones cried as the verdict was read out. Her son said, "We're informed that the investigation into whatever happened to my mother is continuing, and on that basis we're very pleased with the result reached today." Wynn's sister said, "It's not always the right verdict. I don't think he's guilty. He's not that kind of person." Prosecutor James Tucker said it could not be proven that Wynn had actually been the one to commit the abduction, but they were sure he had played a part in the plot. Wynn would appeal his conviction. It went before the U.S. Court of Appeals, but was flatly denied. Wynn would be released in April 2006, but maintained he had nothing to do with the kidnapping of Annie Heron, nor the extortion plot against her husband. Newton Alfred Wynn died in 2012. 2 years after the disappearance of his wife, Robert Heron sadly died in November 1990 at the age of 73 following a heart attack. He died without ever finding out what had happened to his beloved wife. Annie Heron was declared legally dead in 1991. A memorial bench was put up by her husband's grave in Lakewood Memorial Park. Robert Jr. spoke about the complex emotions they were all dealing with as a result of his mother's abduction. It has been nearly 34 years since Annie Heron disappeared. She has never been found and her whereabouts remain unknown. It is the hope of her family that she will one day be found and they will finally have some comfort in knowing her fate and being able to lay her to rest. March 14, 2003, The Hobbit Pub, Southampton, England. On that evening, everyone at this pub was chilling out. Among them were a girl named Hannah Foster and her friend. Both of them were having a great time there, and when they felt it was getting late, both friends left the pub by 10:50 p.m. Now, since it was quite late at night, Hannah Foster's friend caught a bus from a road named Portswood and headed home. On the other hand, Hannah started walking home because her house was just 800 meters away, roughly 0.5 miles. 3 people lived in Hannah's house: her father, Trevor Foster, her mother, Hilary Foster, and her younger sister, Sarah. The Fosters were early sleepers and early risers, so they usually went to bed early. They assumed that their daughter would come home, eat, and then go to bed on her own. However, when Hannah's mother woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, she couldn't find Hannah anywhere in the house. Normally, it wouldn't take Hannah more than half an hour to come home, but now several hours had passed. Therefore, Hannah's mother, Hilary, called her daughter, but Hannah wasn't answering any calls. After this, gradually Hannah's father and younger sister also come to know about her. Following this, Hannah's father, Trevor Foster, calls the girl with whom Hannah went to the Hobbit Pub the previous night, but she tells the same story that I've already told you. After this, Hannah's family also tries to find her themselves, but by now it was already 10:30 in the morning, so Hannah's father starts to worry a lot about his daughter. Because of this, he goes to the Southampton police station and files a missing complaint for him. Now the police start investigating the missing person case from their side and first trace her phone. Well, the good thing was that Hannah's phone was active and the police traced the phone through the mobile towers. Naturally, the location of Hannah's phone was showing approximately 20 to 25 miles away from her home. Now the police reached there within an hour. Where the police found Hannah's phone was the city's recycling center, and along with the phone, they also found Hannah's bag there, but Hannah was not found. On March 15th, Hannah is also extensively searched for, but her whereabouts are not found. As they continue the search, March 16th arrives and Southampton police receive a call from an anonymous man from the outskirts of the city. He informs them that he has just seen a girl's body in the bushes. A police team is dispatched to the location provided by the man. Since the previous day, the police have been searching for Hannah Foster and they also had her picture. Therefore, the police first compare Hannah's picture with the discovered dead body, and they believe it to be Hannah Foster's. Subsequently, Hannah's family is also summoned, and upon seeing a member of their family in this condition, they become quite emotional. Nonetheless, the body is then sent for post-mortem. The police have to wait for several hours for it. However, when the post-mortem report arrives, it states that Hamill was first written and then murdered by strangulation. However, some traces of the killer's semen were found on Hannah's clothes, and this made the police believe that the case would be solved soon, because DNA would be extracted from the semen and matched with the database to find the killer. But the police's imagination proved wrong when the DNA sample of the killer was not found in their database. Anyway, here the police, losing hope, check Hannah's call details, which leads the investigators to take another step towards solving this case. Actually, Hannah had last called the emergency number 999 from her phone, and the operator had answered the call. The call lasted for 50 seconds. After that, the police reached the operator and collect Hannah's call recording from there. In addition, the operator said, "I kept saying, 'This is emergency helpline, what's an emergency?' for 50 seconds. But there was no response from the other end. When investigators enhanced the recording of Hannah's call, they realized that she is sitting in a moving vehicle. Additionally, there is another faint voice with a South Asian accent. The man asks Hannah questions while she sits quietly, appearing scared and intimidated. After obtaining the call recording, the investigating team accelerates progress in Hannah Foster's murder case. Now the police also check all the CCTV cameras in the area, where Hannah's friend last bid her farewell and caught a bus. After scrutinizing several CCTV footages from that road, the police eventually narrowed down to 7 suspect vehicles. On the other hand, Hannah's parents are eager to see their daughter's killer brought to justice swiftly. They now also discuss these 7 vehicles in public. In the meantime, on March 26th, Hannah's parents talked to people through a local crime TV show called Crime Watch about those cars. As a result, it emerged that one of the 7 suspect vehicles shown on TV was a van belonging to their company, Hazelwood Foods. The supervisor, James Dennis, called in and said that the driver of this van does not have his own vehicle, so he also uses this van to come and go from his home. Furthermore, that night, the driver had gone to deliver on this road. Time and location of the van were exactly where Hannah had started to walk home alone. After that, the police get a good lead for the first time in this case. But the man driving the van was named Maninder Pal Singh Kohli. Upon speaking to the company supervisor, it was found that on the morning of March 15th, Maninder Pal came to work, but there were some marks on his face, whereas there were no marks on his face the previous day, that is on the 14th. Additionally, on March 15th, Maninder only worked half a day and then took half a day off citing a back pain reason. However, it was only later discovered by the police that Maninder hadn't returned to work since that day. Now, hearing the whole story, investigating officers along with forensic experts arrived at Hazelwood Company. Subsequently, the van driven by Maninder was thoroughly examined by forensic experts, and some traces of semen and blood were found in his vehicle as well. With all this evidence, such as Maninder Pal's disappearance, finding semen and blood in his van, they were pointing fingers directly at him for Hannah's murder. However, apart from this, the police once again scrutinized Maninder Pal's van through CCTV cameras, and it becomes clear from the CCTV footage that Maninder Pal had taken his van to the recycling center on the night of March 14th, and where Hannah's body was found, his van had also passed through that road. Maninder Pal had now become the prime suspect for the police. Therefore, the police now embark on the search for Maninder Pal, and first they go to his home address, obtained from the sandwich company where he used to work. There, Maninder Pal's wife and 2 children used to live, and his wife was a citizen of the UK. But upon reaching there, the police learn something that completely changes the course of the case. In fact, Maninder's wife reveals that he had actually left for India on March 18th, because Maninder's mother was very ill. After learning this, it was imperative for the Southampton police to apprehend Maninder Pal in the Hannah Foster murder case, but it was equally challenging. And then, amidst all this, when a blood sample is taken from one of Maninder Pal's sons and the DNA is extracted from it, it matches the DNA found on Hama's clothes and inside Maninder Pal's van. Now, because a son inherits about half of his father's genes, therefore, the DNA of both the father and son is approximately 99.99% identical. It had already been confirmed that Maninder Pal was indeed the real culprit. After that, the police from England contacts India through the government. Now, since Maninder Pal's ancestral home was in the city of Chandigarh in India, assistance is sought from the police there. Subsequently, the Chandigarh police obtained the address of Maninder's house and reached there. Here, the police find out that Maninder Pal had come to meet his mother a few days ago, but after staying there for 3 to 4 days, he left. Since then, he has not contacted his home. The police also learn another piece of information from Maninder Pal's family at home that when he was in England, he used to wear a turban and keep a beard. When he came to India, he got a clean shave and also got his hair cut. Until now, Hannah's parents had also found out about their daughter's killer, and they were also waiting for him to be caught. But now, the Chandigarh police was not giving this case much priority. By this time, the news of this case had not even appeared in the Indian media, so normal people didn't know much about it. As time passed slowly, there was not much progress in the investigation. Considerable amount of time had passed, so Hannah's parents took it upon themselves to catch the killer. Then, about 15 months after their daughter's death on July 10, 2004, they come to India. At this time, they were only in India for 10 days. After that, they come straight to Chandigarh and speak to the local media there, appealing to catch their daughter's killer, Maninder Pal. Apart from this, Hannah's parents had separate pictures of Maninder. In one photo, he had a beard and a turban, while in another photo, he had shaved his beard and cut his hair. It was easy to identify Maninder through these pictures. After this, Hannah's parents waited for a few days. But then they decided to go to Delhi because there are national and international media offices. After this step by Hannah's parents, the news of their daughter's murders spread throughout India within 24 hours. The headline of every newspaper and news channel became Hannah Foster and Maninder Pal. Here, Hannah's parents also arranged a free hotline so that anyone who knew about the murderer could call this number. The Southampton police here announced through a news agency called The Sun that they would give 5 million Indian rupees to the person who provides any information about Maninder Pal. By now, this news had spread like wildfire throughout India. Then, on July 15, 2004, A car driver residing in the city of Darjeeling in the state of West Bengal, India, called a retired police officer whom he knew. Now this police officer had already retired. The driver called the officer and told him, "There is a man who has been living here for a few months, and his appearance resembles that of Hannah Foster's killer, as shown in the news. He started appearing here shortly after Hannah's murder." Upon hearing the driver's words, the retired officer immediately sets out to see this man. The officer remembered Maninder Pau's face because they were following this case through the news channel. Afterwards, when that driver showed the police officer the man, the officer was quite surprised. Then he immediately contacted the local police, and the local police caught Maninder Pau in the bus going from Kalimpong town to Nepal. Here the police find out that Maninder Pau was planning to flee to Nepal, after seeing his news on TV channels and newspapers. Besides, the police also find out that Maninder Pau had changed his name to Mike Davis in West Bengal. In addition to Maninder, there was also a woman on the bus, and then it was revealed that Maninder had remarried after coming to India. Now Maninder was arrested and brought to Delhi, and during the custody of a few days here, Maninder confessed to his crime. Then he told the whole story of how he murdered Hannah that night. The story was something like this. Actually, on the night of March 14th, 2003, Maninder was parked on that road drinking in his van where Hannah passed by. But when he saw Hannah, bad thoughts started coming to his mind. Afterwards, he forcibly kidnapped Hannah and placed her in the van. Although there, Hannah requested to be released from Maninder, but Maninder paid no heed to her requests. In the meantime, Hannah also called the emergency helpline number, but due to Maninger's presence, she couldn't say anything. This led the call operator to believe it might be a misdial. Later, Maninger takes Hannah to a deserted area and rapes her. However, after committing the crime, he realizes that if he lets Hannah go alive, she will go to the police and file a complaint. Therefore, Maninger strangles her to death. Then he disposes of Hannah's body where it was found. On March 15th, the next day, Maninder takes half a day off from work under the pretext of a back pain. But he had Hannah's mobile phone and handbag with him, so he dumps them in a recycling bin at the city recycling center. Afterwards, he goes to one of his friends and asks for some money on loan because he had to go to India to meet his sick mother. However, his friend doesn't have as much money as Maninder needed. Then Maninder comes back home and also tells his British wife that his mother is sick in India, and he needs to go there and require some money. Understanding Maninder's need, his wife talks to her father, and on March 17th, Maninder's father-in-law lends him some money. The very next day, Maninder catches a flight to India. However, the excuse of his mother being sick was just a pretext. In reality, Maninder had come to India to escape from the England police. Upon arriving in India, Maninder goes to Chandigarh. His ancestral home meets his mother, but here he completely changes his appearance. After changing his appearance, Maninder goes to Darjeeling, and after some time he changes his name and marries another woman there, where he starts living thereafter. Now, because neither anyone in India knew about Hannah Foster's murder nor about Maninder Pal, Maninder wasn't caught for 15 months. But then when Hannah's parents come to India, only then is Maninder caught. Anyway, after that, Menendez is brought to Delhi, and then on July 28, 2004, giving an interview to a news channel, he confessed his crime on TV. But upon the whole incident while confessing, Maninder denies and says, "That night I had drunk a lot, didn't want to kill Hannah, but when I met her, then Hannah started threatening to complain to the police. Although I threatened her a lot, but she didn't agree, which led me to kill her." However, in August 2004, Maninder Pal changed his statement. He said, "I didn't do all this willingly, but it was done to me forcibly." After this statement, Maninder was placed under judicial custody in Delhi, and then the process of extradition to Britain begins. This process takes about 3 years, but finally on June 8, 2007, the court granted permission for Maninder Pal to go to England. Once in England, Hampshire police arrest Maninder. Then Menendez's blood sample is taken, and it matches 100% with the DNA found from Hannah's clothes and semen obtained from the van. After that, from December 10, 2007, the trial begins in the Winchester Crown Court. Here, Menendez appeals not guilty to all the charges against him. Menendez said that night, "Some criminals broke the window of the van and threw Hannah's body inside the van. Now, because they was drunk to trap me, those criminals forced me to rip Hannah, and they may even force to kill her." Even in court, Hazelwood Fruits Company supervisor James Dennis testified, but Maninder said, "I borrowed 16,000 euros from James, and he is also under the misconception that I am having an affair with his wife. That's why James is targeting me." Nanander also said maybe James hired those 3 men to frame me and forced me to commit this crime on the night of March 14th. But in the end, when the police investigated Mananderpal's all statements, it all turned out to be lies. And finally, on November 25, 2008, all the allegations against Mananderpal were proven. After that, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Now he will be imprisoned without parole for at least 24 years. At the time of sentencing, he was 41 years old and he will remain in jail until 2030. Of the 5 million rupees reward offered for catching Mananderpal, 367,000 rupees were given to the taxi driver who first informed the police about Mananderpal. With this, the money was divided among 12 other people because besides the taxi driver Jason Lepcha, those people also played an important role in solving this case. However, Jason used that money to buy land and then established a school for disadvantaged children on it, named the Hannah Memorial Academy in Foster's memory. Then in 2006, when Hannah's parents visited Darjeeling and learned about this, they were very pleased. When these people returned to England, Hannah's parents started a registered charity to help Jason along with other people. This now greatly helps Jason Lepcha's school. So friends, this was the complete story of the Hannah Foster murder case. The case of Chris Watts, Shannon Razusek and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shannon was from Aberdeen, and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris' parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Shannon and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Shannon and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed 2 daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Shannon had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Shannon defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Shannon was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Shannon was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Shannon expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level, as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Shannon's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shannon worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Shannon had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Shannon loved her job and it showed. As her coworker Cynthia Durozet put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Shannon had one wish, to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband and 2 daughters. In spring 2018, Shannon got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, she wanted to capture her husband Chris's reaction, so she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Shannon was having a baby boy. Shannon and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Shannon was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina, while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Shannon took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece, without considering Shannon's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Shannon was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Sean expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions and that Shanann's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Shanann was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Sean and their two daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Shanann was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Shanann felt hurt and surprised by Chris's distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Shanann felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Shanann sent a heartbreaking text to her friend, explaining the situation, and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches, facing away from each other. Shanann suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Shanann too much to do that. But Shanann was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Shanann, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Shanann that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Shanann was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Shanann proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Shanann was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Shanann came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Shanann soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shanann's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Shanann opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Shanann was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris' account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Shanann returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Shanann entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shanann's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Shanann missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Shanann, Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shanann's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shanann's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Shanann would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Shanann's friends contacted her husband Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Shanann might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Shanann's friends were puzzled by Chris's response because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Shanann was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Shanann and their daughters, Bella and Cece, as missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shanann's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, a police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's body cam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Shanann and her daughters. When Chris arrived, He approached the officer, but unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Sean and Chris's home, the officer found Shanann's purse, which contained her medication and that of her 2 daughters. This finding concerned Shanann's friend Nicole, but Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shanann's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. A camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety, which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shanann's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Sean or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave an interview to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Sean hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. Chris appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shanann's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Sean might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Sean and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Sean during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Sean and, to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Sean. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Sean and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shanann's safety, they held onto the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife Sean was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Sean emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris' father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Sean but claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, this excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shanann's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Shanann was eagerly awaiting the birth of her third child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shanann's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Shanann was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shanann in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shanann's body in his truck and drove to his worksite with their 2 daughters. Tragically, Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate.